Why did your parents allow you to marry a 32-year-old when you were only 15? That's a very good question, and I get it a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it again. I'm going to have to give you a little bit of history about my parents. I was born in Kentucky in the late 60s, in the midst of the civil rights era. We lived in a rural area, and my parents were both pretty severe alcoholics. During her life, my mother had given birth to 12 children. 2 of them were stillborn. I was number 8 of the 10 who lived. My mom and dad were very abusive, not just with each other, but with all of their kids. I was the half-brother. I would always be referred to as the half-brother, and it made me feel like less than a whole family member. Now, my mother grew up in an orphanage, and she only had a 6th grade education. So whenever any of her children grew up and graduated from the 6th grade and started asking her questions that she didn't have an answer for, she could become pretty damn belligerent. Absolutely none of us actually lived with my mother until we were 18 years old. Some of my siblings went to foster care, some of them got married really young like I did, but there was a definite pattern with my welfare queen mother wanting to get rid of her kids before they turned 18 and their checks got cut off. She just didn't want the responsibility. Now, my mom and dad had split up in a very violent breakup when I was about 5 years old. I've talked about that here on TikTok. And I didn't have a strong bond or relationship with my father. I would just see him occasionally over the years. The day that I actually got married to that 32-year-old woman, I had not seen my father for over a year. And I can tell you that he definitely did not sign any paper for me to get married. He did not consent to this. My mother actually convinced my stepfather Herbie to sign the paper. So he was the one who consented for me to get married, even though he wasn't even legally related to me. For a 6th grade education, that woman was pretty crafty. And the truth is, my marriage should have never been legal to begin with because of that fact. But it was legal, I got married, and then a year later I got divorced. I spent my childhood being physically, mentally, and spiritually abused by my mother. She had no problem punching me in the back of the head, slapping me in the face, kicking me into a wall, pushing me, shoving me, pulling my hair, scratching me. You name it, my mother did it. I mean, for a whole year, my mother kept me and my 2 brothers trapped up in the attic of our house. We weren't allowed to go anywhere, and we had to pee in a bucket because she didn't want us to come downstairs with her new husband, Herbie, and her little baby. She wanted to pretend that she had this little family downstairs that we weren't a part of. So she kept us in the attic. And when I was 5 years old and I was in kindergarten, my baby teeth were weak and brittle and broken and black because my mother never got me a toothbrush or even bothered to show me how to brush my teeth. And when I was 12 years old, my neighbor's uncle molested me for the entire summer. My mother would let me go to his house and spend the night, where he would molest me and then send me home with money, and she would take half of the money. Of course, the understanding was that the money was for doing odd jobs around this man's farm. But let's face it, that was a pretty fucking odd job. And when I left my wife at age 16 and I needed some place to go, I knew I couldn't go back home to my mother's place because she wasn't getting a welfare check on me anymore. So I ran off to Chicago, where I ended up having to work the streets for a living. I never asked my mother for anything, and she never offered to send me a penny to get by on during the most turbulent times when I was practically homeless. But she would ask me for money, and I would take out of what little bit of money I had and send it to her, because I never stopped loving my mother. And I still love her to this day, as crazy as that might sound. In summary, my parents did not let me get married. My mother did. My dad had nothing to do with it. And my mother let me get married because she wanted to get rid of me the same way that she wanted to get rid of all of her children as soon as they became smarter than her. Thanks for your question. I hope I answered it. Follow me for more true stories.